On the 17th of October 2010, highly experienced hiker Pam Bales set out to hike a 6-hour loop through New Hampshire's Mount Washington. She planned on completing a late-season ascent of the 6,288-foot peak. Pam had thousands of hours of experience on the mountains under her belt and had packed for almost anything the mountain could throw at her. The hike was going smoothly until she had climbed up around 5,500 feet. The weather began to turn and the conditions grew treacherous. Shortly after she called it for the day and began the descent back to her car, she noticed fresh footprints in the snow that took a sharp left turn right off the marked trail. It was clear that these tracks hadn't been made by sturdy hiking boots, but by sneakers. Pam followed the prints, and a few steps later, she saw a man slumped on the ground. He wore only tennis sneakers, shorts, and a light jacket. A layer of snow blanketed his clothing. She called out to him and was answered only by silence. Pam Bales, keen hiker and former nurse, had been volunteering with the Pemi Valley Search and Rescue Team for 5 years. She was eager to hike and summit Mount Washington and enjoy the serenity she often found in the mountains. So, on the morning of October the 17th, Pam drove to a car park near the snow-covered Jewel Trail, where she planned to begin her hike. She was well organised and had left a note detailing her itinerary on the dashboard of her car. Pam always left plans of her hikes in her car, as well as copies she gave to 2 of her friends who were also fellow volunteers of her search and rescue team. She also had 2 contingency plans and many extra layers of clothing. She had checked the highest summits forecasts posted by the Mount Washington Observatory before she left and calculated that, based on her experience, her plan was realistic. She knew that Mount Washington, with its unpredictable weather, has claimed over 150 lives, making it one of the deadliest mountains in the United States. Just before 8 AM, she set off up the Jewel Trail. She felt a wave of peace wash over her as her boots crunched the snow. Every so often she'd stop and take a selfie. As she climbed, she would gradually have to add more layers of clothing as she entered colder air and deeper snow. At 10:30 AM, Pam broke through the tree line and discovered that the weather was beginning to rage. High winds thrashed the mountain, and thick fog wrapped around it, so she added even more layers of clothing, goggles, and gloves before she continued on. As she was climbing, Pam was considering calling it for the day and heading back to her car when she noticed something. She realized there were a set of single footprints in the snow that were made not by boots, but by sneakers. Pam felt something was off about it, but she continued the climb. It was now around 11 AM, and Pam was getting colder and facing harsher conditions with each step, so she decided to take shelter behind a large cairn, which is a man-made pile of stones, and reconsider her options. Pam decided to abandon the summit attempt. She would activate her bailout plan by continuing to the junction of Gulfside and Westside, turning right onto the Westside Trail and over to the Ammo Ravine Trail, where she could head down the mountain. Pam took this picture of herself shortly before she decided to abandon the summit attempt. Pam battled the lashing winds and deep snow as she headed down the exit route. Visibility was poor, so she followed the sneaker tracks, hoping to see the next cairn. However, when she followed the tracks further, they signaled a hard left turn right off the trail. This was disturbing, as surely no one could navigate alone in the low visibility of the conditions, despite being off the trail completely. Pam followed the tracks, yelling out and blowing her rescue whistle, but there was nothing. She continued to follow the tracks through the wind and the fog. She eventually came across a man sitting with his back against a boulder. She called to him, but he did not answer. The man was wearing just tennis sneakers, shorts, a thin jacket, and fingerless gloves. He was soaking wet, and snow covered his clothing. His head was bare, and his pack was empty. He was pale and going into hypothermia. However, he was alive. Glancing over Pam while she desperately tried to question him, he did not respond. Pam knew incredibly difficult decisions now lay ahead of her. The thought of having to abandon him in the interest of her own survival was truly a horrifying prospect. She began dressing him, warming him, and decided to give him a name. She called him John. She fed him hot chocolate, electrolyte cubes, applied heat packs under his armpits, neck, and torso. And after some time, he began to slowly awake. She knew they needed to get moving, so she pleaded for John to stand and follow her out. After around an hour, John managed to rise to his feet. He finally attempted to speak with her, slurring his words and telling her that he lost his way in the poor visibility. They set out to begin the descent, and Pam followed the depressions in the snow from her trekking poles, following them like breadcrumbs until they reached the trail. She figured that the only viable route out was back the way they came, back to the Gulfside Trail, turning right and heading back down to Jewel Trail, and then descend. Low visibility was a major hazard as the pair made their way along the ridge that they crept, seemingly inches at a time. Pam wished she could follow her earlier footprints, but the winds had erased them. Periodically, Pam would ask a question, but at most, John would only grunt in response. She couldn't understand why he'd ventured up so high on a day like that, dressed as he was. She was moving them slowly from cairn to cairn, trying hard to stay on the trail. While they were descending, Pam turned and saw John curled up in the snow. He told her he was exhausted and that she should just continue on without him. Pam wasn't having any of it and demanded he stand and continue. Slowly he rose to his feet, and Pam felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It was now sometime around 2 p.m, and at this point, darkness was not far away. Although the trees would protect them from the wind, it was much darker under the canopy. Pam switched on her headlamp as they continued their descent of the trail's tricky curves. With only one headlamp between them, Pam would inch her way down a steeper section, then turn to illuminate the trail so John could follow. Finally, after 6 hours of descending, they reached the parking lot. It was just before 6 p.m. They were drained and exhausted. It was dark, and later than Pam had planned to be home. Pam's climb to the spot where she located John had taken about 4 hours. 6 hours had passed since then. She immediately rushed to her car and started her engine. She placed John's soaked and frozen clothing inside so the heater could thaw them out. To her amazement, John stated that he had no other clothes with him. She questioned him on why he had no spare clothes or food in his car, but he wouldn't answer. He simply thanked her, got into his car, and drove away. Pam was left bewildered, standing in the parking lot, glancing back at the howling mountains they'd just escaped. When she returned home, Pam wrote an email to her search and rescue teammates recounting the rescue. They debriefed and speculated about the events that could have led John into such distress, but there were still so many questions. President of her rescue team, Ellen Clark, received a letter in the mail and a donation tucked between the folds. The letter read the following: "I hope this reaches the right group of rescuers. This is hard to do, but I must try, part of my therapy. I want to remain anonymous, but I was called John. On Sunday, October the 17th, I went up my favourite trail, Jewel, to end my life. Weather was to be bad. Thought no one else would be there. I was dressed to go quickly. Next thing I knew, this lady was talking to me, changing my clothes, talking to me and giving me food, talking to me, making me warmer, and she just kept talking and calling me John, and I let her. Finally learned her name was Pam. Conditions were horrible, and I said to leave me and get going, but she wouldn't. She got me up and had me stay right behind her, still talking. I followed, but I did think about running off. She couldn't see me, but I wanted to only take my life, not anybody else, and I think she would have tried to find me. The entire time she treated me with care, compassion, authority, confidence, and the impression that I mattered. With all that has been going wrong in my life, I didn't matter to me, but I did to Pam. She probably thought I was the stupidest hiker dressed like that. I was, but I was never put down in any way. Chewed out, yes, in a kind way. Maybe I wasn't meant to die yet. I somehow still mattered in life. I became very embarrassed later on, and never really thanked her properly. If she is an example of your organization/professionalism, you must be the best group around. Please accept this small offer of appreciation for her effort to save me way beyond the limits of safety. No, did not seem in her mind. I am getting help with my mental needs. They will also help me find a job, and I have temporary housing. I have a new direction thanks to wonderful people like yourselves. I got your name from her pack patch and bumper sticker. My deepest thanks, John. In the years since, Pam has become something of a mountain legend. She's since had a film made about her, titled Infinite Storm, released in 2022. She attended the film's premiere in New York, where she met the cast and crew in person. Now in her 70s, she lives in Texas and spends about half her week as a patrol volunteer at the national parks in the region. Pam subsequently stated she never found out exactly who she helped that day, but she likes to think he is out there somewhere, enjoying his second chance at life. Thank you so much for watching.